Have you ever wanted to increase the field of view of your telescope? Maybe to get that last outer edge of an object in the field of view, or perhaps to get several objects in the same frame? Well, using Mosaics is an easy way to do that, and in this video I've got an easy way to both plan and import those coordinates for Mosaics into the ASIAir. Let's get to it. Hey everybody, Nick here from Windy City Astrophotography. So we're going to be talking about mosaics in this video, how to plan them effectively. We're not going to get into the processing so much. Probably in the future I'll be putting together a PixInsight mosaic processing tutorial, but I will show you at the very end of the video some of the images that I've gotten using this planning mode through the ASIAir. Pretty happy with how they've turned out, and I'm looking forward to getting more integration time in the future. But for now, let's turn to Telescopius.com. This is my go-to planning tool for really all things astrophotography. You get all sorts of information on weather, the moon phase. Something I find very useful here is the end time of the sunset. So they've got it starting at 6:15 and not ending till 7:48. What's that mean? Well, that's the end of astronomical twilight. So if you shoot before then with maybe something that isn't a narrowband filter, you might be seeing a little bit of sunlight, a little bit of that creeping in there. Similarly, with the sunrise time, the absolute earliest, or I guess latest time you'd want to be imaging here would be 5:28 a.m. Of course, sunrise isn't until 7 a.m. here in Chicago tomorrow morning, but you wouldn't want to be pushing it much past 5:28. Now, with narrowband filters, you can cheat that just a little bit, but that is an especially helpful indicator there of when it's actually going to be truly dark, or at least as dark as it's going to be, depending on the moon phase. But you can also do a little bit of planning here as far as what kind of objects that you want to image. You can filter here by the type, bright and dark nebulae, also globular clusters, galaxies. This is also helpful for just visual observing as well. Maybe your astrophotography setup is clicking away there and you want to get a little bit of visual observing done as well. This is a great planner for that too. So the most useful thing I find here is when you search for an object. Let's say I search for North America, the North American Nebula, NGC 7000. Now I am signed in here, and if you do that at Telescopius.com, you're able to save your imaging and observing equipment. So the next time you sign in, you can just choose what devices you're going to be using that night, and it populates here and gives you the field of view. So you can see here, this is with the RASA 8, and I'm also looking with the 1600 mm Pro. So the field of view here, 2.53 degrees by 1.91 degrees. So pretty wide. If we're framing on the North American Nebula here, it works pretty well. Now you might say, well, I could just search for North America, or really NGC 7000 in the ASIAir. That is true, but if you want a specific framing, this can actually be really useful. Let's say I wanted to get the Cygnus Wall and the Pelican Nebula in here. Actually, I've used this framing before. One of my first videos showed a surprisingly good image that I got of this with pretty limited integration time on a not particularly good observing night. But if I wanted to find this field of view in the ASIAir, I could definitely do it. First, I'd search either for the North American Nebula or the Pelican Nebula, and then perhaps press and hold at the very center of this dark nebulosity here and get a rough estimate. But notice how the RA and the declination at the bottom here are updating as I move my mouse pointer. That's really important to notice. So if I set this field of view as I want it and place my mouse pointer right at the center here, you can see here that's showing the RA and the declination for that center point, the center of that frame. So I could either add that as a custom object and just input that information into the ASIAir, or I can copy and paste it. So what you can do is actually go to this 4 square object here. This is the mosaic settings. And here, it's not a mosaic, it's only one frame, but you see pane 1, the right ascension, and the declination here. I can copy that and then import that into the ASIAir Pro, or the Plus, as I'll show you soon. Now this is especially useful for objects that maybe aren't in the ASIAir searchable objects, or something that's just really dim. You want to make sure you've got that framing right, because even with 1 or 2 or maybe a 5-minute exposure, you're not seeing much on that object. One that comes to mind would be the Dark Shark Nebula. So that's LDN 1235 is how I can search for it here. There's a dark nebula, and here it is. Now, even in this view here, I'm not seeing much. Let's turn up the brightness on the survey here. There, just barely, we can see the eye of the shark. Here's the mouth right out here, and the rest of the shark is extending back. So I would frame this up, well, maybe like that, let's say. I could then take this center point of the field of view. So what I'm going to do is go into the Mosaic settings. I'm going to copy that CSV. Now you can then, if you're doing this on your device, maybe the phone or the iPad that you're using the ASIair on, you can just paste it directly into there in the import settings. However, I'm usually trying to plan ahead a little bit, and especially if my observing location isn't going to have a data connection, I want to make sure I've got this information already on the ASIair before I head out. I'm going to put this into maybe a keep note or whatever your choice would be. Maybe you could text it to yourself or email it to yourself. Whatever you need to have it on the device where you're using the ASIair, where you can interface directly with it and add that object, add that frame to the ASIair device. Okay, so I've done that here. I've imported or just copied that location information. It's all of the text gets copied, and then you can head over to your ASIair. Now, I'm in plan mode here. So what I'm going to do is say this is a new plan. There's all sorts of things that you can choose to do here. I'll go into a plan mode maybe in a future video with a little bit more detail. For now, though, I want to show you how to import. So I'm not going to hit the plus button here. In fact, I want to hit this square with an arrow pointing into it. That's going to import a plan. So for this custom object, just a custom framing on a singular object, the Dark Shark Nebula, I'm going to paste that in. I'm going to say import. And now what I can do is hit the plus, and then let's say I want to do 2-minute exposures and do 60 of them, a couple hours of exposure time on there. Now you can change this at any point. This is just adding a generic amount in there. I can then hit back and this is populated. Now, once you have slewed to this object, you could then add a custom object within the searchable object collection on the ASIair. I don't have a mount connected currently to the ASIair for shooting this video, so I can't show you how that works, but it's adding a custom object and then using the current RA and DEC of the mount as the location of this custom object that you want to add. But now I want to show you how to do a mosaic and how you might plan that and also import it into the ASIair. So I want to show you actually a mosaic area that I did earlier this year. It was late in the summer, the Crescent Nebula. So let's find it here. Let's turn down our brightness. It's certainly quite a bit brighter than the Dark Shark Nebula. So here's the crescent. Now, if I just wanted to shoot the crescent, I could import NGC 6888 into the ASIair, and that would give me this framing right here, right on the object. Really no questions asked. However, even if this is a singular view and you're not going to be doing a mosaic, you might want something a little bit more like this with the object slightly offset. Maybe you're getting some of the bright nebulosity up towards Satyr, the bright star here. That's maybe a little bit more of an interesting framing, and you could import this as a plan and save it as a custom object for maybe a crescent frame, something like that. However, if you wanted to do a mosaic, let's click in the mosaic settings. I'm going to make a 2x2. Now, there's plenty of options in here. You can really do whatever you want. Now, all of a sudden, we have 4 of these fields of view. Notice how they overlap here. The amount of overlap is determined here by this slider bar. Generally about 20 to 25% is what I go for. I've gone as low as about 15. That starts to get a little bit dicey because depending on the framing tolerances, exactly how exact your pointing is and how much the ASIair is going to say, okay, that's on the object, however many arc minutes off it might be, that can really affect your stacks. So if you're going for multiple nights, multiple filters and things like that, you might end up trimming quite a bit from the edges of your stacks due to some artifacts there, and that really starts to cut down on the actual overlap between these regions. But with this framing of 25%, I think that's pretty good. That gets the crescent here with plenty of buffer on the edge of this frame right here. You've got the Butterfly Nebula, the beautiful dark nebulosity here with the bright wings off to either side, and the bright star Satyr, of course, as well. One thing I would encourage is to try and avoid having a bright star right in the overlap section. Sometimes it's unavoidable, but with that mosaic processing, that can sometimes be a little bit of an issue. It doesn't, especially if it's right at the edge of one of the panes, it can present a little bit of a problem with that mosaic processing. But overall, this looks pretty good. Now, if I go back to the Mosaic settings, you can see here the center point of each of these 4 panes. Once again, copy that to the clipboard, and then I'm going to import that, in my case, into a Keep Note, but you can send it to yourself or just paste it directly into the ASIAir software. All right, so I have copied and pasted this into Keep, and here we can see. Now, it's important that you don't add any extra spaces or any characters especially into this, because this is an output of text that the ASIAir knows how to read, and it's going to be using that directly. So we have this all set. Let's copy and paste into here. So we're going to go to plan mode. We're going to add a plan, and let's call this Crescent Mosaic. That'll work. We're not going to worry about any of the settings here. We're going to hit confirm. Now, we're going to import the plan. We're going to paste all of that there. We're going to hit done and import. Now, here's where it looks like it didn't work, but in fact it did. All you have to do is add whatever exposure time here that you want. All right, so we got 30-second exposures. We've got 10 of them. Now, you do have to first put in exposure time and the number of frames that you want to capture in at least one of these boxes before this will allow you to do this. But you hit back, it says, do you want to apply the current sequence and settings to all importing targets? You want to hit apply. And now you've got all 4 panes imported here. You can double check the RA and the deck if you need to, just to make sure it's all framed up correctly. And this is definitely all set. So you've got 4 panes here. What you can do is hit go on this plan for it to start. It's going to go to that first pane, take the number of exposures at the set duration, and then move on to the next. Now, this is perfect for multiple nights and multiple filters. All you have to do is fire this up with a new filter in place. Maybe you change the exposure time depending on how your settings go with your setup, and then it'll fire away and it'll be all set at the end of the imaging run. All right, so as far as what you can expect, once again, I'm not going to be doing a full processing walkthrough on this Mosaic, but just an idea of kind of that workflow, just a very high-level view of what you can expect to see. So I've first got my hydrogen alpha stacks, so those 4 panes put together, and I eventually crop those down and put them together into a full HA mosaic, which I think looks pretty good. And then I've got the O3 with a little bit of a gradient there. I was able to remove that pretty easily using the background extraction in PixInsight, and also the S2 as well. Now, when you're processing these mosaics, it's really a lot easier if you kind of do 2 together and then the other 2 together and mosaic those first, and then merge those 2 new images, merged images, together into one single mosaic. So you can see here the SHO top and bottom, and then I've got the SHO mosaic as well. Now with the RASA, I do need to mirror it 180 degrees due to the mirror flip there. So we flip it for the RASA, and then we get a little bit of processing magic here, and this is our processed view in PixInsight. So overall, I was very happy with that, and yeah, it's a fun thing to do. Now I will say, even with that HA stacking, if you just want to do an HA mosaic, I think it's a beautiful aesthetic. It's got just the grayscale, the black and the white, and I've done that with the North American Nebula and the Pelican. And also I've got a nice one that I'm planning to add a lot more integration time this fall for the Heart Nebula. So it's an interesting way to change the way your setup is able to see the sky. You can get a little bit of a wider view, maybe taking the full object that you might not have been able to before, or multiple objects in the same frame. Well, if you found this video helpful and you think it might be helpful to others, definitely give it a like and comment down below. Let me know what you thought. Also, don't forget to subscribe to Windy City Astrophotography. Clear skies, and we'll see you next time.